Peace, Patreon. This is Fleur Brune coming to you today. Hey, Patreon. I'm glad you're joining me for this conversation. I thought I'd actually make, there was a couple videos I wanted to do strictly for y'all regarding this, some intel that I don't necessarily want to talk about too much more publicly, but rather more on a smaller scale, just because I think that if there was a reason why I'm able to share it, then maybe I need to be more distinctly careful about sharing it in a reckless way. Need to be a little more careful. So peace to y'all. Peace to the east, the west, north, and the south. This video, I'm going to get into the visit to the underworld. I talked about it on YouTube a bit, and on Instagram got in a little bit of a conversation again about it, but I thought it was important to share, as I think there's a concept, well, at least I had a pre-concept of what the underworld was. You know, the connection to Anubis, which is why there's a fascination with many people to dogs, which Anubis represents that canine energy. And even in the concept of the Baphomet, which I found was interesting. Let me back up because, you know, I need to be more focused when I'm sharing and talking to you. So as many of you know, I had an incident that was traumatic, and actually the result was me losing 2 babies, okay? And during that process, I went through what I consider to be what some would say near-death experience. And I've had these before, but this was, I think, a little more profound, as my father was actually on the other side when this one occurred. And I actually passed through the veil, which I've been doing for months now, actually since my father's passing. I did a little bit previous, but more so since my father's passed. I think it's going on 2 years, a little over 2 years at this point. So I'm sorry. If you ever see my boobies, I'm sorry. I have to apologize beforehand because I'm just so socially sometimes unaware of how I look, because sometimes I'm just getting the idea out. So forgive me if I'm being a little bit more disclosing sometimes of my my figure than need be. So let me raise the camera a little bit. So after the trauma, I wasn't aware and I wasn't awake for a while, and I had visited again, there was a David. I visited a few people who had passed in the other realm, which you consider the land of the dead. And it's really transitioned souls. Some have moved on, and some kind of linger there a little bit, and it's like a purgatory a little bit. It's kind of like the cross world between going beyond that space, that transitional space after you leave your physical body and you stay there for a little bit. There's during that period when you're in that space, this is for the transcended people who have passed on. They go through a reliving of their lives, like a revision of their lives, and it's kind of shown on them what seemingly seems like a screen. And it's interesting because I haven't seen this necessarily for myself, but I actually witnessed others watching and getting an idea of seeing their real play, their real. So during this time, I was with my father and I walked along with him, and I was visiting people. Some were people from past that passed along, that actually specifically came because I'm associated with some people from YouTube and from mostly from Instagram. That actually was from Instagram. Oddly enough, it's interesting because they take all the opportunities if they get to contact or be in alignment with someone who can transmit a message to their loved ones, or, you know, regarding something that they're probably still in a way still want to relay. There's messages they want to relay. So anyway, there was a David, and I talked about that on Instagram, but I'll go a little further. So after this time period that I was over between the veil with the land of the dead, so to speak, I was released and sent back. And it was fine. I think the only thing that I was concerned about is going back to my children. I think if I hadn't had little ones, it's such a wonderful, peaceful place that it's kind of like with the recklessness and the feeling that you have here in the Matrix all the time. It isn't like there isn't a feeling of wanting to go back unless you have something or tangibility or family that you're going back to. I can see that if it's someone who doesn't have those ties to the physical realm, they wouldn't want to return. So I was sent back, and when I was sent back, I wasn't sent back into the world of the living right away. I was immediately invited to go into the underworld. And I took the invitation. Now, you're asking, did this happen verbally? Was there something that was said to you? It was literally in my mind. An invitation came in my mind to visit, because I remember having a choice. Okay, let's say this, having a choice to go directly back into my hospital bed and just go through the recovery process, or I had a choice to go through to the underworld. And for some reason, it didn't faze me. And maybe being a Sagittarius doesn't help, because your curiosity kind of gets to the better of you. And at that point, I felt like it was for me to be invited in my mind's eye was a testament that something else was occurring that had to do with the trauma. Maybe it was relative to all that had happened over this course of a couple of days. When I entered into the underworld, there was a being there, and I kind of discussed this a little bit on Instagram, but I want to get a little more in depth here. What was interesting about this is, in order to get into the underworld, you are either infiltrating, meaning that you're doing something diabolical to be able to get in there without any permission. Okay, meaning you're jumping in there without any permission, covert, kind of like stealth. Okay, the other way to go into the underworld is by initiation. And you realize when you're there that those people who are doing rituals, a lot of high masons are there. Obviously tons of satanic or Luciferian imprinted people are there. There are beings there that are actually, they don't really have a form. They just show up as shadows. So you can't really tell who and what those are. I almost take them as watchers or lookers looking from another parallel or dimension, or looking from the world of the living into the underworld, those who are peering in. So the only way that you're getting into the underworld is by infiltration, initiation, doing rituals, blood sacrifices, or invitation. The 3 I's. Infiltration, initiation, or invitation. I got an invitation. When you're about to enter into the underworld, it's a process. And there is a being called Sakrit. Now, why I know the name is because it just automatically was the name that was transmitted. Let me say transmitted upon arrival. Now, what you do is it's almost like you go into a white room. It's interesting because it looks like a, excuse me, hold on. Let me get comfortable. It almost looks like a cube or a hospital, like a very aesthetic, or like what you consider to be like the old movies when you see Looney Tune, loony houses. I call them loony houses because in the movies, that's how they used to portray them, as these white rooms. There wasn't anything in it. It almost looked like it had a tunneling effect. So when you enter the room, because remember, I'm leaving the land of the dead, and the land of the dead is different. It's a little more misty. It's more surreal. There isn't anything like perimeters that look cubic or anything like that. There's just like, it's a layering effect in the land of the dead. When I say layering, it's like you can go from seeing a blue sky and trees to like entering into like a hallway, or entering or like entering a pasture. Or it's interesting because it's a layering effect. Like I said, when you're when the world of the dead, there isn't like a set placement. It just, you're walking in and out of different perspectives of others' realities, of how they remember things. So you're almost walking into someone else's hologram and just viewing it from the perspective of how the person remembers their life, or whatever, whatever screenshot they've held in their consciousness when they go on the other side. This is different. This is more tangible in that you literally feel concrete when you're there. So there's a room, a white room that you go in. There's a being called Sakrit. Now Sakrit stays and almost, when you meet Sakrit kind of permeates through the wall. I can't say, okay, let me take that back. Secrete doesn't permeate through the wall. It just doesn't seem like there's a wall there, but this being appears. Let's just say that. I want to say there's a wall, but there isn't. I want to say there's a door, but there isn't. It's a white room. Secrete comes. Now, Secrete is wearing the same white that's in the room, but you'll notice that there's gold, what looks like Arabic. It looks like Arabic, and I want to say this because it could be... oh, we had a little disruption there. Interesting. Anyway, I was talking about the being that greets you at the underworld entry. White room, boxy room, like a cube. A being appears. I don't want to say a door or a wall, because there isn't that concept of that. They just appear. They're just there. Maybe my perception of them only comes aware of them when I'm noticing there's something appearing in front of me. The being has all white on, and like I said, Arabic letters in gold, going down the sleeves. It looks almost like they're wearing a suit, like a zoot suit. It's a white looking suit, but it's not a suit, and it's not tight to them, but it's like what you would see a business person wear, but a little more sleek, like more like business meets like the Vogue. You know, it was very interesting. It's like the Vogue. You know, it was very interesting. It's beautiful to see. I mean, it's very alluring. I would say, if I had to think of anything, I've never seen anything like that necessarily in front of me. The being in itself had an ambiguous quality, and that is why I got the concept of why gay males, a lot of gay males that I've talked to have this concept that they're the gateway. They keep saying that they're the gateway, and I never understood what they were talking about, because I never heard gay females say this. I only heard gay males say this, but I also heard this in the transgender community, where they call themselves the gateway keepers. And again, the concept I've never had, but when I met Secrete, and Secrete was a very ambiguous being, meaning that this being was seemingly a male, but it wasn't really a male, it was both. Very unisex and visual. Like even the presence of the being seemed feminine, but the physicality of the being was masculine, very mixed. The hair was blonde, like a whitish, I can't say blonde, like white hair. White hair kind of to this shortish kind of thing. Eyes were like a see-through sea blue, like a bluish clear eye that looked frightening because it was see-through. Like a very, very light blue eyes. You've never seen anything like it. It was like water. The eyes looked like water, but just see-through, and like a little beady middle that looked almost green or gold or copper or whatever in the middle. Very odd looking creature, but that was the being that was the actual gatekeeper. So I understand now why some of the males consider themselves to be, I guess they consider themselves to be of the genre of beings, the unisex beings that are actually the gateway to the underworld. Go figure that. Had no clue. I understood it now. Well, hindsight is 20/20. I understand it now, but I didn't understand. And I didn't think there was relevancy to why they felt that way. I thought it was kind of like something that just came out of, you know, maybe some concept that I had never heard about. So as I enter into the to the underworld, there's a shifting. So you go and you Secrete enter, it allows you to enter. And it was anything more than a nod and a backing away sideways to allow me to move forward. Now, I had no concept of walls or doors. That's what I'm saying is very odd. It's a room that's white. He's wearing white. He's wearing, Secrete is wearing white, blondish, whitish hair, kind of short cusp, gold, what looks like Islamic writing on the sleeves on one side. And as she, I don't want to say as Secrete moved aside, just sideways, and I entered, there wasn't anything other than just a feeling of like walking through a web. You ever walk through a spider's web? Kind of like that. When you walk in a spider's web and you walk and you just notice it feels kind of weird on you. You feel like a web on you, but there wasn't anything there. That's the feeling, like a whiskey feeling as you're walking through. And once I got in there, there were a lot of interesting sights. Now, I don't want to get too detailed because some of the sites were disconcerting and some other sites were just neutral. I mean, you get in there, you have a concept that you're in the underworld. You understand what the underworld is. And I also had the concept in somewhat in my mind from reading some of the emerald tablets, because they kind of get into the specifics on the underworld and the different genres and how it is. But what I noticed, as soon as I walked in, it was a labyrinth. Okay, you can feel it's a labyrinth, like a puzzle, because every time you move, it's not moving forward. It's almost like so let's just say I'm moving and I'm walking, but what we normally would know as forward walking, I could be walking to the side. It's very odd. So I'm walking, but I could be walking left or right, even though the motion seems forward. It didn't matter because there wasn't a need to turn. It was never a need to turn for me, because in it itself, because it was a labyrinth, every way moved on its own. So the path that I was moving towards automatically just evolved in front of me, meaning that it would just move to the direction that was necessary to get to where, as you'll hear, the finality of where I was supposed to go. And as I'm walking through, at the beginning, you notice there's a feeling of death. There were like the beginning part when you walk through is you see like little skulls on the side. I'm assuming they're children's skulls, but they're kind of permeated out of like what looks like a sand wall, and their heads are all this way, and some of them have like holes in the top of the head. Some heads have like a little hole that looks drilled. Others look like maybe they're deformed. Just various heads. I didn't really look too hard. I just noticed it, and I kind of kept in the motion of moving because I didn't want to stay too long in something that could have played out. And I had the concept that whatever I was supposed to go towards, the path was revealing itself to me, and I was just going to move, and whenever it was necessary for me to be set somewhere, I would probably have that as an option. Walking through, there was also a what looked like a kitchen, and the kitchen had like a steel serving platter tray with stuff in the tray. It looked like entrails or I don't know what was in there. It just looked like intestines. It just looked like goulash that was sitting there. Wasn't any being there with it, but it was sitting there as if it was being prepared. And then there were herbs and things like I saw like a batch of like herbs or plants that were next to it. And then on the walls there were like these signs for, I don't know what they were for, signs showing or maybe descriptions of what was in these little jars on the wall. And I did see an eye in something that was moving. So it was like I said, it was a labyrinth. So you're moving and everything's evolving in front of you. So you're basically witnessing levels and the layers of this underworld. When I moved continuously, there was also a light being. There was a couple of light beings, but there was a light being that looked like, I don't want to say it was a child because it didn't have the feeling of a child, maybe more so as a younger dwarf, you know what I mean? And when I say younger dwarf, it wasn't a child, but because the being was small, she looked almost like a cherub. She was small, blondish, like curly blondish hair. She had like bluish like see-through kind of wrapping on her. I knew she was an angelic being or a light being because of her energy. Her frequency wasn't of that. She looked and gazed at me and looked away, and she actually had like a sparkly kind of like a little bit of gold sparkle like when you looked at her. And I noticed that she was reading scrolls or something. There was like scrolls inside of a wall. Again, a sandy kind of wall. And that was her, that was what she was basically doing. That was her. She looked at me only as curiosity and kept whatever her agenda, I don't want to say agenda, whatever she was there for. She wanted to read or take note on whatever she was looking in these scrolls. And it was several different round scrolls that were in the sand wall, again, like the children that were on the left when I walked in. And she was taking, I noticed she took each one out. One kind of was a little, it fell apart when she opened it, I think, because I noticed that there was like sand, or maybe there was sand in it. I'm sorry. I'm drinking as this is water, but I added blackstrap molasses to it as well. So go a little further. I don't want to bore you with this part because it actually is quite interesting, but you know, the finality of it is actually probably the most alluring. So I'm walking through. Now there are beings that you hear. Now as you're walking through, there's whispers and there's wind. So you can hear wind whispering, but you can't really feel it. And someone asked about the temperature, if it was cold. It wasn't cold high there. I didn't have a feeling of temperature until I got back. There, I didn't feel anything. I felt zero temperature there. I just felt normal. There wasn't any difference of how I felt as I feel right now. Fast forward, I'm seeing different beings. I saw one without a head. I saw beings on the ceiling as if it was a floor. So I would see, like I would walk through, and as I would enter into another space, there would be what looked like an inverted floor. So I would look like I'm walking, but really I was walking in some points on the ceiling while other beings were walking on the floor in an inverted pattern. It's really spacey. Now I understand why some people who do drugs all these people tripping off LSD and drugs, this is probably the things they see, or places that they may enter based on maybe their consciousness, or being doing a cheat sheet of, like, you know, bypassing the bypassing your pineal, you know, because your pineal gland is like a portal, bypassing it and going into these spaces where you are able to witness some of these things. Also, I noticed that some of the spaces that I would go into, there would be codes, like little binary codes that would be released, and then they would dissipate into like a dust, and then they would come back together, release, and go back into a dust. Now, I didn't stay long enough to know if they were the same codes going over and over, or they were different codes showing up. So I would just move forward. And there was a point where it seemed like I was going into a open space, like a cave. And when I say a cave, it was bigger than a cave, like a cavern, a cavern, more so a cavern, because what happened is this was different, because as I was going forward, and there were other things that I saw, there were what looked like rats were looking like dogs, rats that look like dogs. I've never seen anything like that. There was an older lunar lady who was sitting in a rocking chair, but she was holding someone else's eyes. You know, things like that you were seeing that was odd, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is the thing of nightmares. You know, some people are actually witnessing these things and probably not able to, you know, probably lose their minds. You know, I've seen so much. So basically, this is like everyday business. It's sad, but it's beautiful in itself, because it takes out the fear element, because I can observe from a very removed disposition. Okay. As I enter into this space, as I said, it was closed at one point, but then it opened up into what was like a cave or a cavern. And there was like a little bridge that you had to walk across. Now, walking over that bridge, what was interesting is because it appeared to be a bridge, like a cobblestone bridge, like very skinny and narrow. So I remember to myself to walk with one foot in front of the other. That's how skinny it was. And then looking below and seeing like golden magma underneath, like just golden magma. I didn't smell anything. There wasn't a smell of, you know, sulfur, because I would have thought I would have smelled something, but you could see it all the way at the bottom. And how I just call it magma, it may have not been, but it was bubbling, and it looked like what I've seen in volcano videos, and even in volcanoes that I visited, it looked like that magma. And as I'm walking the cobblestone, it seemed like every time I took another step, each cobblestone vibrated. It was the strangest thing. It vibrated, almost had a sound, almost like a musical note. And I can't say for sure because it felt that way. And once I came in past this bridge, passing, wow, I'm getting I'm getting scratches on my arm as we speak. Wow. As I'm walking forward, I got to be careful saying forward because it wasn't forward. It's just a movement that just has its own destination. There was a huge, now they were sitting before I entered the chamber. Now the chamber was huge, and I say it's a chamber, but it was like a big cavern. The being was, you can see from where I was walking because it was a distance that I had to walk. It wasn't a short distance. It was a long enough one, but I just was focused. And like I said, every time I walked over another cobblestone, it looked like a cobblestone. Each rock or that I was stepping on had like a vibration and almost like a sound. So as I further move along, there was a point where I had stopped at the bridge, and in the bridge there was some sort of like a step, but like a see-through, and you couldn't see it per se, like a see-through, like a door. It wasn't a, maybe a screen. Okay, I'll say this, a screen. Okay, it was like a step and then a screen. And in front of that screen, you could see that there was something like a, sacred geometry shapes, like a hetero, what is it, a tetrahedron. I recognize that tetrahedron. Weird shapes on the front of the screen, but not on my side of the screen. And what I noticed is that as I stood in front of the screen, each one of those shapes, the tetrahedron would just disappear one by one. And when it disappeared, the screen just moved. It just moved like, not in an up or down motion, but like this, like this. And I moved forward, and like I said, the being was sitting on some sort of like a high, like a, I've never seen anything like it. Like it was like a king, and the king and queen would have their chair, their royal chairs, but this wasn't like that. It was made of something stone or natural material, almost like a weird kind of black, porous type of material. And you can see it had intricate etchings or engravements on. You can see it from a distance because inside of those engravements, it almost looked like there were things moving, like sentient things, like things moving inside of it. It was very weird and very interesting. And as I moved forward, I did stop because the being was so high up and so big from a distance. It took me a minute to think of why I would get an invitation here. It's kind of like buyer's remorse. Like I took the invitation, not knowing who invited me, and I'm about to meet the being who invited me, and I had a little bit of hesitancy. It wasn't so much out of fear, but it was more out of my own, it was more for safety reasons, because I had to feel if there was any malice or any intent harm that I could feel previous to me actually moving forward to see who it is that was calling me. So I'm moving now at this point forward. The being is high on like some huge stairs, like a stairway, like a weird looking stairway, almost looked like bats were on the stairs. It was trippy in that I'm always sober, so I can only imagine, because I talk to a lot of people who are high all the time, and I've tried marijuana in the past before. I think oh gosh, I had smoked marijuana before I had children. Not all the time, but once in a blue. And I hadn't done any really heavy drugs other than that. But I'm just saying, just having that kind of perception, being what? Oh no! And someone gave me some edibles, which made me trip out, which I didn't know what it was. But anyway, it's kind of like that loopy disposition. But their chair, their throne was like black, porous looking, chair, but it had emblems in it with things that looked sentient inside, and they almost had a glistening look. That's how you could see, and only from that could you notice that there was etchings inside. So I moved forward, and as I moved forward, I realized that the being was now standing and coming down the steps. Now as they came down the steps, it didn't seem like they were walking down the steps. It almost felt like they were floating, or hovering, like downward. I didn't get the concept of boom, boom, boom. I got the concept of like they stood up. That was a physical action, but they glided down the steps. It was quite a few steps. And as they did, their size to me, it just went and increased, because even from the distance, I realized they were huge. From close, they were big. Okay, when I say big, I say like, I don't know, in the size comparable to me. Now I have to be careful because I don't really know for sure, but I would say maybe, imagine I'm nearly 5'9", and this being had to be close to 11 or 12 feet high. And that's just me giving you a perception of how big they were. It could have been bigger and a little taller, but that's where I got the concept of how big they were in comparison. And they understood that that would be something that would be issuish if they got too close, so they stayed a certain safe distance from me to disallow for my perception to pick up the height difference, because I felt like that would probably have caused a problem. Because if fear would have been a motivation in me, if I would have had fear come about, I really feel like my life might have been in danger if that came inside of me. Fear wasn't an option for me at that point. Now, the being itself was a female, looked like the Baphomet. She was tri-breasted, which is interesting, but you see different ET groups with certain interesting physicality. Her skin was like a red chili pepper, red hot chili pepper, very dark red, like a blood red, but chili pepper. Her horns were not so much straight, but they were like twisted like this, almost like a dreadlock. The horns were twisted into the side. They weren't up or back or down. They were twisted to the side, each horn. On her horn, she had some sort of like threads of gold and maybe silver, like a combination of metals that were on her horns that were kind of falling down like a design. That was probably the most alluring thing about this being. It wasn't that she was horrific to see. There was reverence on watching her, but there obviously the intimidation factor is that she was so big, and it was a form that I wasn't ever accustomed to, but she did hold a feminine vibration. And in my mind's eye, I was like, wow, the underworld is ruled, because that was in my mind. And you can just imagine how Florburn thinks. I thought it was just cool that a matriarchy was running the underworld. Go figure. I knew that the Baphomet is an androgynous being, because if you hear about the people and the concept that the Baphomet is a hermaphrodite. But if you realize that the original females on the planet were hermaphroditic, but they were females, meaning that they were able to replicate themselves, that to me calls her a female. People will say that's being hermaphroditic, but to be honest, the original females were hermaphrodites. So even if she was a male, she was a female in her original form. This being was towering, and she had a very feminine presence, very, now mind you, strong. It's something we haven't seen any woman hold this other than the Andromedans or some of the other ET groups that still have their power and paralysis. But it was everything that I always wanted to witness. I'm being honest, because as a woman on this planet, I think even the concept of strength is always denoted to a male. And to know that this being was head honcho of the entire underworld, it was humbling, but it was absolutely something that I was grateful to witness. Now, her eyes were, the eyes were, the windows to the soul or non-soul, but their eyes were probably the one part that I try to avoid the most, because to me, it seemed, it just wasn't anything that you would want to see. Her eyes were, I don't know if many of you have seen Charlotte's Web, which is an old cartoon version of the book. But the eyes of the spider, Charlotte, they didn't have the multi-eyes like normal spiders do. They had beautiful 2 eyes, and hers were blue in the movie. But the difference between Charlotte's Web eyes and this being was that, hold on. What am I not getting? Okay. This particular being's eyes were the shape of Charlotte's Web's eyes, but they were carbon, and they look like black glass. Okay, I don't like to use the word black, but I can use it for this one. They literally look like the entire eye, which is the shape of like Charlotte's Web, the spider box. It was so glassy that everything almost ordered near was. It was so intimidating, her eyes, that I kept evading them. Now, what I felt when this being was communicating, there wasn't ever any words. Her total communication was telethought. And when I say telethought, it means that she would put the visuals in my head. And initially, when she attempted to, I felt my head feel like it was going to explode, because I'm not as much of whatever these beings are to take in the type of intel or the way that they communicate. So imagine you're trying to put information in a computer that doesn't have the hardwiring or the software able to take in that kind of information. So you know that you're going to tax the system. That's kind of like what she was doing to me. She was telethought communicating with me, but my hardware isn't quite up to up to par with how she's normally able to communicate with beings that are on the same level of consciousness. So it took her a while, and you could feel my head like pounding a little bit, vibrating. And also this right here was off the chain. This right here. My first eye was off the chain. When I just say I had pushing, pulling, and then like, you know, the little tweets like tickling right here, pushing, pulling, and then eventually, bam, you could feel it. Like you felt it open up. I never felt that before. And once it opened up, that's when I got all the intel. And I realized why she requested from me. And I'm thinking to myself, because in myself, I'm thinking, I'm not that special. I'm not that special to have an invitation from the underworld to a lordess who is the ruler of the underworld. I'm not that special where I'm one of the people that has the ability to share with masses. You know what I mean? We share together on our platform, but it's not like to the point where you would think she would want to share this with me. But in that thought that I had when I was thinking that to myself, she picked it up, and the first thing that came into my mind that she sent is, that's why it's being shared with you. Because in you, quote unquote, not being special makes you special. Interesting concept. My very modest platform with our beautiful sea stars and sun stars is why I was chosen. So in me being just a normal, regular, more normal than I'm sure comes down there. I mean, they got high-end Masons going down there, Luciferians from generations of Luciferians, Satanists. You know, you have celebrities probably going down there, people who do rituals. These are the type of people that she's usually probably accustomed to interacting with. But I was everything I thought that shouldn't have even been in or given opportunity to have this exchange. So it is an insecurity that I say this. It's just kind of an immodesty. Like I didn't understand why I would get an invitation, but she translated that is why I did. There wasn't anything diabolical about her. I didn't feel any malice towards me. I felt more so like a aesthetically clear neutrality that was based on observation and a hidden agenda. Okay, I did feel like there was a motivation, obviously, behind the sharing with me, because the amount of information that was shared with me superseded anything that I didn't even ask for all this information. I didn't even know to ask for some of the information I was given. That's how you know it was there's a motivation behind it. Because why would I be why was so much shared with me so easily without me pressing for it, even requesting for it? So needless to say, she gave me intel on all matters of life. I did get the aspect of the future, and I did share that on YouTube, is where there's a future aspect of us coexisting in domed crystal that are hovering above some waterways, and that the earth would be a lot more water on the surface of the planet, and that the children from babies would be using telepathy and telekinesis easily, as if almost the same as if the babies would coo here. I noticed that they had biosuits, which I thought was awesome. That was one of the things I noticed, because when you're getting the telethought, when this being is actually giving, when this blew open, the pineal gland, and it took a while. Like I told you, when she initially was using telethought, I am old hardware. I couldn't take it, because all you felt was pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling, pushing, pulling, then tingling, tingling, and then it just blew open. You could feel it like opening, like bam. It's very interesting, and it's a little vulnerable, because you don't realize, like even now I have an awareness. It even hurts a little bit, not hurts, it's sensitive, because I have an awareness of that being opened. And in giving me the visuals, even though I get the visuals, I'm there. So when she gives me the visual of seeing the future aspects of things occurring, I'm actually physically there, and I have to pick and choose what I want to see, or what is more alluring for me to see. That's why I noticed the biosuits. The biosuits were probably the coolest things. Not everybody had them, but the people I noticed that were facilitators or other things, they all had biosuits, and I was aware that those biosuits registered their blood, their heart rate, their blood pressure, their temperature, their stability and instability. It would detail everything, so that if anything came up, they would be addressed through the biosuit, and they would be automatically sent to what they called what do they call something I remember because I saw it. Commerce of Season of Commerce of Health. Maybe it's called the Commerce of Health. I remember seeing it. I don't remember. Maybe I don't remember specifically the name, Commerce of Health. And when you go to the Commerce of Health, you actually lie down in these chambers, and they recalibrate you and fix you up back to how you were previously. And then you go about your business. There isn't any illnesses there or sickness. There isn't any necessity for anything. You just exist. People were delegated to their own, I don't even say positions, because it wasn't that serious, but what they were delegated into what they desire based on what they do well. So like I said, if you're a great person who loves, design or drawing, I'm sorry, you would be in a position to create art spaces or to teach art classes, and also you exchange for people. There wasn't any currency like fiat or anything like that. They were exchanging their talents. That was their donation, or their what they lent to the society. So there wasn't any need to exchange for anything, because everybody was abundant. But if you offered anything and lent something to society, it was based on the things that you did well. I thought that was beautiful, and that was a concept that I hadn't gotten. Also, I was aware that these dome cities, it wasn't a lot of them, because I had to think about that. From what I saw, there were maybe 6 or 7 worldwide on this earth. And I was also aware that there were dome cities inside the earth that had hosted humans post-apocalypse, would we consider to be the apocalypse. And those in the inner earth were really taken care of a little differently, because I felt like the ones on the inner earth were maybe more affected by whatever was going on the surface. Maybe they weren't up to par. That's just a concept. I couldn't really read it because I wasn't there that long, but that's what I saw. And that's when I was pulled out of that. Also, I was made to know the concept of lead. Now, I'm going to do another video on that. I'm not going to go into that. There was a lot of things that have been taught to us and created purposefully to totally allow susceptibility to all kinds of infiltration and chemicalization. She also showed me there were a lot of landways that are going to be devoid of life. Like there were what normally used to be fields of grass and beautiful thriving plants and crops. All looks like old moldy and non-watered crops and waterways. All I see is like dying wheat, dying dying farms. There wasn't anything like that. Yeah, I saw it. And also I saw a windstorm that looked like it looked like solar energy going over these areas, like radiation, almost like there was radiation outside. So solar winds bringing in radiation, and that was why a lot of the crops at these big farms were decimated. I saw that. Um, I also saw that there weren't as many males. Like I saw there weren't as many males. I forgot about that. There weren't as many males in the future. Like when I say males, the majority of males that I saw mostly around were very effeminate males. And it leads me to believe that our society will be coming back to the point where there aren't any more males in society, that they're going back to 0 point with the original females were all female. Why? Is because I hadn't noticed any males that were, when I say males, just meaning a hetero, what you consider to be a heterosexual disposition. I hadn't seen any. Not to say I saw everything, but I thought that was interesting when I saw very effeminate males, and there weren't a lot of them. It was mostly women, but there weren't a lot of them, and they were usually in positions of like one was an engineer. And another one I saw him taking down measure measurements of something. That was the engineer. No, the other guy. What was he doing? He was doing something. But all the jobs that those males were doing were more so like jobs, that physical jobs, where the women did things that were more spiritually based. And again, it wasn't a lot of males, but the males that were there were highly effeminate to how I witnessed them. Anyway, there was a host of other things that I actually encountered with her. And I'm gonna share a couple more videos about the lead, everything like that. But as I got the entirety of everything to be shared with me, I was aware that time needed to be caught. Listen, time needed to be caught, and before I could turn, I was aware there wasn't a goodbye, it wasn't anything like that. I could turn, Secrete was there, and I turned to Secrete. And when I turned to Secrete, I was in a white room again. So I didn't have an exit out the labyrinth. I didn't have like I didn't walk down that way to get there like I did when I first went. I just appeared in the same entry point that I had entered in when I went into the underworld. And Sakrit was the one who allowed me out. And once I did, now I was able to share, a lot of this intel with you. Now, why do I want to share these bits of information? I think it's necessary. I think why it was shared with me was simply because it is the meek that inherit the earth. And this being had the concept and overstood that there was going to be a swift change that would basically take out all of those beings that are part of what would be a sect that she's most accustomed to being exposed to. And that's what made it interesting. That's why it was odd to me, as being exposed to all the darkness, how she didn't hold light in the sense that she was sweet or kind or anything like that, but she had such reverence and balance in how she interacted with me. I found it to be amazing. And also, I feel she understands that though her realm has been created on what we consider to be darkness, she has a realization, this is what I gathered from her, that there isn't any darkness if there isn't light. Like, there is no concept of light if dark never existed, and vice versa. And to help to assist in the balance also allows her world to still exist in a way that will hold a space of hold on. You heard that? Hold on, family. Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard it as well. I heard a sound at the door. It gets a little creepy when you're talking about the underworld. Anyway, like I said, I gathered that the information had to be shared to allow for balance to be rightfully shared. And I felt like it wasn't going to be shared by the dark cabal. They would keep and hoard information for themselves to only benefit themselves. And if the intel was coming from the underworld, that it needed to be shared with those who bear the light a little differently, to make sure that the balance was upheld on the surface of the planet during the shift. So I felt like this was more about sharing with a genre of people like ourselves, more just regular people. And that's what I'm saying. I thought it was interesting that they would invite a regular person. I know that I have magnanimous things happen to me, and I know that I'm a contactee, but it's still in itself, I represent the normality in that spectrum of genre. I really do. I represent the mommies and the regular, women or people living in the matrix. There isn't anything that special, but that's what made me special to them. So I'm going to share over the next couple weeks massive amount of intel about what was shared with me, and it is going to blow your mind. Ever since that visit to the underworld, there have been realms opened in my home. During times and night, there are what is it, poltergeist activity in the home. Has to do with portals being open because I brought rabbit residue from me. Whenever you have that kind of undercurrent from the underworld and kinetic energy that I brought back with me, it allows for portals to just open without me even doing anything. I don't even know if it's here. Oh, I'm back. So I wanted to share this with you, and for being a part of Patreon, because I wanted to make sure that you guys are coming and staying here and rocking with me on Patreon. I have to really say that I appreciate you supporting me 1000%, and really supporting the platform and really being encouraging to this journey that all of us are actually partaking in. So I have to give thanks to you just for being a part of this. So I think I've decided to do every Tuesday. I think we might do a prepper every Tuesday. I'll actually ask for you guys to vote. On Tuesdays, we'll do a regular show just for Patreon. It'll usually be a prepper show, or it'll be something on a precipice of intel show, where we discuss different ways to basically just keep in the times of preparing for the changes that are about to occur. So I think we might do a Prepper Tuesday, and then we'll do once a month, we'll do, Flipper After Dark, where we can do Q&A about the tantric interactions of our ancient, ancient brethren and sisterhood on the sexual practices that were part of the regenerative, part of regenerating of the mind, body, and spirit that many of the Kemetics and the Sumerians and many ancient Aztecians and Mayans were aware of, and even the African nations are aware of this, obviously, in all the ancient Asian cultures. They're astute in this language and information. So I think this is time for us to share this information. I've studied a lot, I've gained a lot of wisdom over the years, and I'm absolutely open and receptive to sharing it. And I think this would be a great platform to do so. So I think Tuesdays, we're going to do Prepper Tuesdays. And Prepper Tuesdays is like Q&A. I'll make that a regular occurrence, and that will be just for Patreon. And you get to do a Q&A or add your own concept of what prepping is. But I can share different wonderful things I've learned over the years, how to sustain yourself independently. And sometimes you'll see me out in the wilderness, and I'll show you some of my prepping skills. All right, I think that'll be a wonderful treat. So that'll be every Tuesday. We'll set up a time that's more feasible, but I think that'll be fun. And then once a month, we'll do our little Floorbone After Dark, and we'll do a couple other things. But I'm grateful that you joined me for the intel. I think it was masterful. There'll be another video probably tomorrow on lead, and that's gonna blow your mind. That was one of the bit of intel that I got from the underworld. Go fig. We always think that we get things from the angelic realm. That was my concept. I got intel from the underworld. Go figure. And it's legitimate. Yeah. But we're gonna see how this pans out. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I'm grateful that you decided to listen to this video. Hopefully you got some gems from it, and we'll talk soon. Peace.